All right, let's do this. Hi, folks. Psychic Angelo here. Welcome to the Psychic Realm Podcast Network. You know, we have a show called Psychic in the City. Well, you're not watching that show. This is our new one. This is Wrestling with the Future. And you'll understand why in a moment we call it Wrestling with the Future.
Yeah.
This is the show where we talk about all things entertainment, sports, you name it, we're going to talk about it. And the man, the guru, the mountainous, fountainous, informationist, the guy who knows all things sport, Jeff the Ref Robinson. How's that for an intro, Jeff?
I couldn't think any better there. Thank you so much, Angelo. I really appreciate that intro. Where would you like me to begin? I mean, like, what,
You know, I called you the mountainous, fountainous, voluminous fountain of information. When it comes to all things MMA, wrestling, football, baseball, basketball, you are the sports guru.
I would like, I mean, I definitely followed my fair share and know a little bit of knowledge there. Yeah, I wouldn't say, I mean, wrestling is right where I'm the deepest.
And hence the name Jeff the Ref Robinson.
Yeah. I started out as a pro wrestling referee on the independents. I've done a little bit of everything. Never, can't say I ever really got in the ring and wrestled, but I mean, I definitely have been in there with any and everybody. My career in wrestling goes back 20 plus years.
When was your first promotion? What was it and where was it?
It was a local promotion it was an independent down in North Carolina. I couldn't even tell you their name. We were in a National Guard armory. Had about 200 people there, and nervous as hell. They tell you, okay, go out there, kid, and you got this match. And they're gonna, and here's the finish. Okay.
That was that.
Now there you go. And there you go. Dude. It's like, and you're on your own. Yeah, here you go. Good luck. And it's like, okay.
Talk about a crash course.
Oh, it was a definite crash course because I mean I learned a lot though just by being in there with different guys that would teach me, and they would say, okay. And a lot of it, a lot of people don't look at the referee as being that important. Whereas they probably are more behind the scenes than you would even realize as far as calling a match, helping guys through a match if they get lost.
Right.
I mean, I'm getting into a little bit there, but I mean, even the whole seen and not heard, I mean, you got to sit there, you think about it, the referee has to be in the right position at all times. Otherwise,
sure. If
he's in the wrong spot, boom, bang, you're done. I mean, I can tell you there was one time, this is something I go back to. I was in the ring and Hurricane Helms hadn't been Hurricane Helms yet. He wasn't Hurricane on WWE, wasn't anybody. He was getting a little bit of, talk about, from the indies, but nothing, hadn't done anything yet. Anyway, they put us in I was used to a 16 by 16 or an 18 by 18 ring. They put us in a 20 by 20. I wasn't used to it. My footing was a little bit off, my timing.
Right.
And every time he went to go hit the rope.
Just so people know, not to interrupt you, but just so people know, there are 4 sizes of traditional rings. There's 16 by 16, which is traditionally a training ring.
Yeah, it is, and a lot of your independents will use that because it's smaller and easier for the guys to do a lot of their moves or flips and their dives and whatever.
Right. The 18 by 18 is the next step up.
Yep.
And that's the Indy show ring.
Yeah, that's generally your indies, and that used to be what WCW used back in the day when they were around.
Right. Then the 20 by 20 is called the pro style ring.
Yep.
And now, the WWE uses a 24 by 24.
Correct.
That's a big ring.
Yeah. And people don't realize. I mean, you kind of get used to your steps when you're in the ring. You kind of time it out. You go 1, 2. That's the 16 by 16. 1, 2, 3. 18 by 18 and 1, 2, 3, 4 is your 20 by 20 as far as like how many steps it takes from the center to get to the ropes. Anyway, me and Shane, we were in there. It's 20 by 20. My footing was just, it made my timing off. So every time he would go to hit the ropes to go do a dive or anything, I just happened to be in his way. And finally he just turned to me and goes, "Damn it, kid." And I was like, "Sorry, Shane. Off night, man." It was just one of them things that can happen, you know.
Sure.
And, you never want it to, but, you know, it's bound to. And, yeah, I've had crazy, I mean, from that to Wahoo McDaniel, you know, telling me, "Okay, I'm going to throw a chop at you. Just stand there and take it." Okay, yes, sir. No problem. It'll be an honor. You know.
Right. Well, what do you say in that situation?
I mean, you don't.
Exactly.
You sit there and you take it. So, yeah, I would say wrestling is my passion. I love all sports, but wrestling is definitely what my passion is.
Now, you and I have had private conversations.
Many.
Yeah. And your knowledge goes back far beyond your birth date.
Yeah.
So you studied the history.
Oh, I have. I've gone deep into the history and the you know.
Said you're a historian.
Oh, I would like to consider myself a mild historian of wrestling. Yeah, definitely.
So I go back. My first live match, giving away my age, my first live match was 1965.
All right.
I saw Rocky Fitzpatrick,
Yeah.
who is actually Bob Orton Sr., Cowboy Bob Orton's father.
Yep. Randy Orton's granddad.
Right? Wrestling Bruno Sammartino for a title match. On the show that night was Killer Kowalski, Spiros Arion, Captain Lou Albano and Tony Altamori, the Valiant Brothers, and Haystacks Calhoun.
Crazy.
And that was a house show.
Crazy.
But your knowledge goes back that far.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Study.
I like to think that it does. I mean, I'm more of a Mid-Atlantic guy, but I definitely am branching out and I'm learning more and more about the other territories that were around back then. And, I mean, I do know some WWE history. I was very, very good friends with my good friend of mine, Ivan Koloff.
Right.
I called him Uncle Ivan. I meant it.
Yeah, that was a name that a lot of the boys referred to him, Uncle Ivan.
Yeah, if you were in with him, you called him Uncle. Otherwise, you just called him Ivan, and you kind of knew who his inner circle was, and he was.
And for don't know Mid-Atlantic, they might if we mentioned the name Jim Crockett.
There you go. Jim Crockett Promotions is the old Mid-Atlantic territory. When I say territory, that's what it used to be, folks. It used to actually not all be WWE, and now you got a new one coming up on All Elite.
Now, Jeff, tell everybody about the two Jim Crockett's that ran that promotion.
Oh, well, you had Jim Crockett Sr., who started out in probably the 1930s, and he started mainly doing ballparks and rec centers and various armories and around that area. And then when he passed away, his son Jim Crockett Jr. took over, and that was in he took over in the 1970s, but they really experienced a wrestling boom by 1985, and they were, I mean, when people considered the NWA, they were actually talking a lot of times with Jim Crockett, because that was who you saw on WTBS, which was based out of Atlanta.
Right.
Which was the old used to be the old Georgia promotion.
Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Right. And then in 1984, everything kind of shifted.
What happened in 1984?
That was when you had the infamous, that they called it, Black Saturday.
Now tell everybody what we're talking about when we say Black Saturday.
Black Saturday was when WTBS had, well, basically Jerry Briscoe and his brother, Gerald and Jack Briscoe. I don't know who the other players were. I want to say there may have been one other, but they went and they sold their shares of Georgia Championship Wrestling to Vince McMahon Jr. Vince McMahon Jr. was making a power play at that point in time to pretty much take over the wrestling world. And at that point in time, he turned around and everybody was used to seeing Georgia Championship Wrestling. And all of a sudden, they said, "Welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. Here he is, Vince McMahon."
And that was a shock to the system.
Oh, nobody was used to Vince McMahon and what he had.
We also need to set the tone here.
Ready? Oh, I disappeared. There I am.
There you go.
Okay, you're ready.
All right. So when last we left off, okay, 4, 3, 2.
All right.
Well, right after our untimely break, there we are. We're back.
Yeah.
We were speaking about Black Saturday.
Yeah. I was telling basically Georgia Championship. Everybody was used to watching it. 6:05. They tuned in, and you got your normal. I can't even think of the guy's name. And he goes, and ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Vince McMahon. And they said, literally, the phone lines lit up at the TBS down there saying, "Hey, we want our Georgia Championship. We don't want this WWF."
Right.
And Ted Turner was looking for a way to get them off the air because he said Vince wasn't honoring his end of the deal, which was he was still supposed to produce studio wrestling from down there in the TBS studios.
Now, let me interrupt you for just a moment because we need to for people that are maybe too young to have lived through that time, fans today, we need the landscape explained to us. Georgia Championship Wrestling was a Southern-based company.
Yep.
Vince McMahon represented everything about the North.
Yes.
So it was clearly a declaration of war on some level.
Oh, yeah. No,
and you had...
Guard.
And the other thing is that you had two juniors. Explain the dynamics there because you know more about that than I do.
Talk about Vince Jr. and Jim Crockett Jr.?
Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, you have Vince Jr., he grew up in the wrestling business. He saw what it would eventually become. And what he basically had the vision of what it is today way back then.
Right.
You had Jim Crockett Jr., who was still territory, Southern based. You stay out of my area and I'll stay out of yours. You don't promote my area and I won't promote in yours. And Vince Jr. said, bunk all that. Why do I got to acknowledge those territory lines?
Right.
And then you also had, okay, so the Black Saturday goes down real quick. This is what ended up happening. They said, fine, we'll give you championship wrestling from Georgia. We'll put it on TBS. We'll put it on at 8:05 in the morning on Sundays. That was their counter, kind of.
Sure.
You had Jim Crockett Jr., who said, I want to get on major, TBS cable TV.
Right.
He made the pitch to Turner. Ted Turner said, look, if you can get Vince McMahon off, I will give you that time slot. He went to Junior. He said, Vince Jr., he said, what's it going to take for you to, leave? And he said, give me $1 million. Jim Crockett Jr. basically stroked a check, $1 million. Now, here's what people don't also know. A little bit more background here.
Okay. That's what I want. I want the juicy stuff.
Vince Jr. takes that $1 million check, pretty much funds WrestleMania 1 with it.
Right.
So
I knew where you were going.
In essence, Jim Crockett Jr. paid for WrestleMania 1, which helped bury him even further in a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah.
Because Vince Jr. went and he said, I'm going to run WrestleMania 1. I'm going to put it in New York City. I'm going to put it in the hub of what WWF is in Madison Square Garden. And he made it to where LA wanted to be a part of it, along with the New York people. So you had celebrities wanting to be a part of this wrestling event that nobody had heard of. Keep in mind, if you're to go and look through, if you're to look it up, and you knew your basic, which you would from being up that way, but your basic house show cards were, you had, middle of the line matches, and then you would have your world title match, or, whatever. WrestleMania 1, other than Hogan and Mr. T teaming up against Piper and Orndorff, was nothing more than a house show.
It's interesting because I watched an interview today with Tito Santana. Now, keep in mind, at the time of WrestleMania 1, and I just found this out today. Again, I don't follow it like you do, but I found out something interesting. Tito Santana, at the time of WrestleMania 1, was smack dab in the middle of a countrywide feud with Greg the Hammer Valentine.
That's absolutely right.
Why then, my question to you, why then did Tito Santana open the show with Playboy Buddy Rose?
Playboy Buddy Rose was also under a hood, going by the name of the Executioner.
Correct.
Not that really matters, but that's just a little bit more, part of history. I think it was because it was a house show that they were setting up. It wasn't meant to be. Everything was actually geared towards the main event, which was Hogan and Mr. T and Orndorff and Piper.
Now, Jeff, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Because of the booking of that show, did Vince honestly believe in himself that he think it was actually going to fail? Or did he have this sense that it would succeed?
He had no clue. He actually gambled everything on that one event. He gambled.
I heard he mortgaged his house.
He had mortgaged his house. He would have. Well, okay, Jim Crockett Jr.'s money helped push him to where he was able to put the whole thing together. But Vince had mortgaged his house. He pretty much he rolled the dice, and he said, if this makes it and we make money, we're going to be gangbusters.
Now, Jeff, what year are we talking about?
1985.
Now, 1985, $1 million went a hell of a lot further than it does today.
Yes, it does. But you got to look at the celebrities he was having to pay that came in.
Well, he had Liberace.
Which I'm sure Liberace, I mean, granted, he was older, but he was a New York staple. Everybody knew who he was. And I'm sure he wasn't cheap.
And it was Muhammad Ali.
I'm sure Muhammad didn't come in for less than six figures.
There was New York Yankees baseball manager Billy Martin.
Yeah, I mean, Billy Martin, maybe 50 to 100 grand. I mean, the Rockettes alone.
I was going to ask you about the Rockettes. What did they?
You got to figure that.
Fee did they fetch?
You got to figure either high five figures to six figures. I mean, maybe 100 grand to get them in.
So you got most of your you got your budget. $1 million is already spent.
Oh yeah, and then you got to pay the boys.
Yeah.
So you're rolling the dice, and you got to pay Mr. T. And not his entourage.
Right, and not to mention, although I forgot about Mr. T. Yeah, he was actually on the show.
Yeah.
And not to mention, at the time, there was no cable pay-per-view.
No.
This was closed circuit.
Which,
explain how that works to people.
Well, I mean, as crazy as it sounds, you would go to either your local movie theater that may be airing it, and or your local arena would have big screens that drop down, and they'd say, starting time or whatever, be there. You show up, and then they would just start airing it live it was by satellite aired, to wherever your local place was that was airing it, movie theater, local arena, whatever, and you would buy the tickets. I mean, I can remember watching Starcade, which was the NWA, Jim Crockett's big deal, and watching that on the big screen and going there to the local arena. And it's crazy is to watch these screens just drop down. Everybody's there like they're watching the matches, but.
Right. So now, Black Saturday turns into this. McMahon gets his $1 million.
Right.
He goes away. Ted Turner now buys a company that he renames from Georgia Championship Wrestling to World Championship Wrestling.
And he didn't buy that actually until 1988. And he bought that from Jim Crockett Jr.
Okay, so what happens between 85 and 88? What's the timeline?
Well, Jim Crockett Jr. was just plugging away, and he was on TBS, and World Championship Wrestling was actually what they just called the Saturday night show, the 605 Saturday night show. Which they would use that to more or less promote your house shows, to promote your your angles, your big angles, or to somebody may get taken out for a time period. And a lot of times whenever that happened, it was because they were getting ready to go on tour to Japan,
right?
Or wherever.
Now, Jeff, was that still part of the National Wrestling Alliance?
Yes. Jim Crockett was.
Explain that dynamic.
Well, the National Wrestling Alliance was all the other territory promotions that were not owned by Vince McMahon or Vern Gagne, who had the AWA. And it consisted of the various territories. They had, their heads of the territory, which you had Florida, which was owned by Eddie Graham. And then when Eddie Graham passed away, he went to his son, Mike. You had World Class that was down there in Texas. You had Portland, which was up, Portland, Oregon area that was owned by Don Owen. You still had the Maivias down in Hawaii, who were still a part of the NWA Alliance, even though they weren't really promoting, but they still allowed her to, have a vote and whatnot.
And for history's sake, tell people who the Maivias are and how they are relevant today.
The Maivia was, well, for one, she was the very, very first female promoter ever in wrestling, or one of. And history would say maybe a little bit differently, but anyway, it was Peter Maivia. Peter Maivia is the grandfather of the one, the only, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. And he's also the grandfather of pretty much the Samoan dynasty as we know them today, the Anoa'i, which
that would be Afa, Sika, Roman Reigns,
and everybody that they have had since Roman, the Usos,
Fatu, the Usos,
Aka,
yes,
Siviafi, you name them, they've all had I know the joke is if they're Samoan, then they're part of the family.
I actually forgot about Siviafi.
Yeah, he's one that a lot of people don't really remember, but he is part of the family. So,
right,
and their family tree and lineage goes long and far.
Now, were they also part of Samu and Fatu?
Yes, Samu and Fatu. Fatu is actually Rikishi.
Oh, okay.
And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And Rikishi is, we all know who Rikishi is and who he became. So, and Samu Fatu were the Wild Samoans, or the
Samoan headhunters. Who were the Samoan headhunters?
Oh, the head shrinkers is who they became in the WWF.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Because Vince, he's got to change your name. God forbid you keep your name.
Yes, he has to own your name. Yeah.
I don't know if I want to step on those toes quite yet, but I mean, you go in and all of a sudden, you would no longer be Angelo. He would just say, okay, we're going to look at you. Okay, we're going to name you George. And
yes.
And you kind of go with it. Why? Because he's paying you the big bucks. I mean,
sure.
Let's be honest. Why did most of them, are they willing to? But anyway, going back through history, you had the NWA. The NWA consisted of the different territories, and they all voted on the NWA World Champion. Ric Flair is considered one of the last traveling world champions who would travel the various territories. You would have your guy who was on top, who you made look like $1,000,000. He may be your champion, whatever. You would say, okay, he's the #1 contender for the NWA World Title. Ric Flair would come in. Normally, he would, call the guy out on TV. They would have a little, hubbub on your local studio TV wrestling.
Right.
You would give your local guy the win in some way, whether it was a tag match or, Flair called him out. He rips Flair's, suit off. There's a referee there. He counts 1, 2, 3. Therefore, you would set up the house shows for the following week or two, however long they would have Rick there. And he would go around to their main areas, facing their challenger.
Right.
And it would normally sell out or be close to a sellout because the fans were convinced that their champion was going to beat Ric Flair. Why?
Right.
Because they did it on TV.
Sure.
And it worked. It was brilliant and it worked. And they would continue to do that. I mean, even once, I would say almost like Crockett got a stranglehold on it by 86. He was pretty much, the rest of the territories had kind of died out by then. The World Class had pulled out from the NWA because Fritz wanted his boys to get a run with the belt again. And they said, no, your boys are...
Now, that's a very good point. Explain to people how the Dallas, Texas promotion owned by Fritz von Erich changed the dynamics of the wrestling industry. Now, keep in mind, now you probably know better than I, but I know of at least 4 full-time wrestling territories in Texas.
Yeah.
There was Dallas,
Yep.
Which was the Von Erichs, Houston, which was Paul Bosch,
Yep.
Amarillo, which was the Funks,
Yeah.
and El Paso, which was Gory Guerrero.
Right. And El Paso and Amarillo have pretty much...
Am I missing anything?
No, you're not. Not at all. El Paso and Amarillo had pretty much dried up by the 70s.
Okay.
So the 80s, you had Fritz von Erich and Houston, Paul Bosch. And Paul Bosch had local Houston TV. He had outreach as far as like a lot of the local TV stations, but he maintained just the Houston area as his territory.
Okay.
Fritz ran Dallas and around Dallas, a lot of the little towns around Dallas. But Dallas, there was a little arena known as the Sportatorium, which World Class set up. They had TV. They were one of the first to actually get on cable because he struck a deal with, of all places, CBN, the Christian Broadcast Network.
Right.
Which would send, they would say, okay, different places would say, we want your tapes. So CBN was sending their tapes over to Israel. Next thing you know is World Class is a hot item over in Israel, and the Von Erichs are gods still to this day.
It's strange, isn't it?
It is. Kevin and his boys went there for a tour, and they treated them like they were royalty. And as crazy as that sounds, I mean, you're talking 30 plus years later, and they're still looked at as these figures. Now, real quick, sidebar, funny story, good story, something about me.
I'm ready for it.
I want to say it was 87, 88. Kerry had just come back from his motorcycle accident, which very few people at the time knew that he actually was wrestling without a foot and wrestling with a prosthetic.
Explain how that came about.
He was in a very, very severe motorcycle accident. He was coming around the corner. He hit a car, or a car hit him. He was thrown, and it was severely, I mean, his ankle was pretty much crushed. Right. And then if you go with what rumor was, he got up in the middle of the night when he shouldn't have, tried walking on it, did more damage to it. They said, we're going to have to amputate it. And to know, unless you've actually been in a ring, you can't really appreciate what he was able to accomplish wrestling basically with 1 foot.
I encourage people watching this to go onto YouTube and just search the name Kerry Von Erich.
Yep.
And when you watch him, keep in mind that this man is wrestling basically with a prosthetic foot. I believe his right foot.
I would say look up anything after 1988 and see what he was able to do.
After 88.
Yeah, 87, 88, yeah, 87.
And the accident was what year, Jeff?
86.
1986.
Yep.
So he has his leg crushed in a severely damaging motorcycle accident.
Right. Yep.
And he goes to walk on it and snaps it some more.
Yep.
So they have to take it off.
Correct.
But he doesn't stop wrestling because he doesn't know anything else.
And I mean, it was a family business.
True.
So,
his father, Fritz Von Erich, started, I believe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, back in the 40s. Am I right?
Yeah, Fritz started in the 40s to 50s, and by the 1960s, he was the main Texas promoter down there in Dallas and whatnot. So he went by Fritz Von Erich because they said if we make you a German, he knew then that he was going to get heat and able to go anyway.
Right.
But my story real quick was they were affiliated with CBN. Still by 87, 88. My mom worked for CBN or a branch of CBN. And there was a guy that that was in her department that was producing a commercial. And he said, we're bringing in the Von Erichs to do this commercial. He said, is there any way, he was like, I know this sounds crazy, he told my mom. He was like, but I need Jeff to consult with. He said, he's the only wrestling fan I know that can help me write this commercial so it comes out, with the different brothers saying their parts.
Right.
So I helped as best I could at 12 years old, helped write this commercial.
At 12?
At 12. I was in the 6th grade. So he said, he was like, well, look, I want you to watch what you helped produce. So when we bring them in, you and your mom can come on in there. Well, and you can meet them. I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm figuring I'm going to go there. It's going to be, the 700 Club, the whole set, blah, 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 blah. No. This is a private, the family only, Pat Robertson, and there's me and my mom in the audience, and that's it.
Oh, wow.
And my mom tells me, sit there and you got to be quiet. They come out and I'm about to lose I'm seriously about to lose my mind. I'm going, oh, it was all I could do to contain myself. Well,
I can imagine.
And so they happened to, they told him who I was and what I had helped do, blah, blah, blah. The whole family comes over. I had magazines for them to sign, a couple other things. Took pictures with me. I sat on Fritz's lap like I was one of the kids, and I got to meet Carrie, Kevin, Chris was still alive, the mom, Doris, and Fritz. And it's a moment that I will never ever forget. I thank my mom to this day for letting me live a dream that I never thought I would ever have.
Now, do you still have pictures or autographs?
I do still have the pictures, or a couple of the pictures. If people find me on Facebook, find me first. My background pictures of me and the Von Erichs. And as far as the autographs go, ex-wife decided that I didn't need them as much as I wanted them. So.
Gotcha.
You know how that game goes.
Oh, yeah.
So that was my story of when I got to meet the Von Erichs, which was awesome. Amazing moment in time for me. But back to what we were saying, Jim Crockett, he had, from 85 to 88, he was on fire. I mean, you could not stop what they were doing.
It was an amazing time in wrestling.
It really was. Fans these days are getting excited about what they got on the spectrum right now.
Well, don't jump the gun, because I'm going to lead into that.
I got
I'm
you.
going to lead in. I can tell you, as far north as Baltimore and Philadelphia.
Yep.
The NWA used to sell out Philadelphia every month.
They damn sure did.
In fact, one month, they actually beat the WWE that was running at the Spectrum.
Yep.
And NWA was at the Civic Center. They had 13,000 at the Spectrum. They had 14,009 at the Civic Center.
Yep.
For an NWA house show, both companies running on a Saturday night.
That tells you.
I can tell you that the NWA was huge.
That tells you how hot the wrestling was. Think about the numbers that you just said, 14 and 13,000.
Yes.
That's 27,000 fans. You're over 27, 28,000 fans in the city to watch wrestling.
In one night.
In one night. 2 different federations.
Yes.
That's what a lot of fans can't fathom today, is these places used to do this. WWF included, used to sell out on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday night, no problem. They would go to your local arena, and I think when people say, Jim Cornette, even myself, I've been accused of it, being old and jaded, being the old man shaking my fist at the clouds. I want it back. It's not so much of that as it is we remember a glory time where I could go down to the Norfolk Scope every 3 to 4 weeks and see that son of a bitch sold out at 10 to 12,000 people.
Right.
As they talked them into those seats.
Right.
Now, if I go to a local house show and the WWF happens to be the one in town, and they may draw 3,000.
In a 10,000 seat building.
There you go. It says a lot. It says, I mean, that's what makes the older wrestlers and fans angry almost, is there was a time period where where wrestling was that hot, and it's like it can be there again.
Right.
Man, I mean, people think that the Monday Night Wars were hot. No, Jack, this was hot.
Well, now that's a very good segue actually into where we're going now, because you mentioned that being a glorious time.
It was.
Let us fast forward. Briefly, let's touch upon the Monday Night War since you brought it up, and then let's transition into where we are today. Now, I want people at home to know that we're recording this show on September 30th, 2019. This week, the next 10 days will either make wrestling history